Hi. After looking at different organic waste treatment options, in this module we'll look at two specific fractions. We'll look at hazardous household waste and healthcare waste management. If at this point you were expecting a module on hazardous waste, I'm sorry to disappoint you. The wider topic of hazardous waste management goes far beyond the scope of this course on municipal solid waste management. But let me just give you a few words on hazardous waste management. The main bulk of hazardous waste is generated from chemical, industry, fertilizer and pesticide manufacturing, petroleum and mining industry, and also heavy steel industry. At municipal scale, there might be smaller scale production units like leather tanning or electroplating industries. If you're really interested in hazardous waste management, then I really recommend this website. It's a training resource pack and has a lot of resources and information on hazardous waste management. Browse through the different menus and see what you can find. Documents, library, publications, everything is there. So feel free to browse. Now let's focus on the municipal stream and its hazardous fractions. That is what we call hazardous household waste. It comes from households, offices, and small businesses. So what does it include? The 8 most common hazardous household items are shown here. Batteries, aerosol cans, partially filled or not, fluorescent light bulbs containing mercury, automotive products like fuels and fluids, various paints, especially those which are latex and oil-based, household detergents and cleaners, lawn and garden care chemicals, but also pool chemicals, and finally, personal care products, such as nail polish, polish remover, or even hairspray. In general, data is quite scarce on household hazardous waste. However, we can estimate that it's usually less than 1% of all municipal solid waste. There are some industries and some commercial activities where the waste might get mingled with the municipal solid waste. For instance, paint shops, mechanic shops, dry cleaning, leather tanning, electroplating of metals, photo industry, or even construction and demolition waste, which may contain asbestos. For household hazardous waste, the principle is to segregate at source, to collect separately and then manage within a hazardous waste system. Unfortunately, in most developing countries, implementation of such systems and respective controls are lacking. And even waste treatment facilities for hazardous waste are not available. Here are some ideas and thoughts of what could be envisaged for these low-income settings. First of all, create awareness among the population to avoid or even substitute with other products which are less hazardous. Organize sporadic collection days with designated collection points in the neighborhood. We can recycle if feasible, but we need to think about the work conditions for the recyclers. Then we can team up with other industrial partners that anyway must treat their hazardous fraction and can also treat the household hazardous fraction. Finally, what we need to keep an eye on are these special waste generators, provide specific regulation and monitor their practice. Now let's look at healthcare waste management. That is waste from hospitals, clinics, and dispensaries. What is most important is to know that only 15 to 25% of healthcare waste is actually hazardous. The rest is actually like municipal solid waste. So it is most important to segregate this hazardous fraction from the rest. Here is a list of categories of hazardous healthcare waste. Sharps, that's needles and syringes, but also blades. then infectious waste, blood and body fluids, infectious cultures, pathological waste, human tissue, organs or body parts, pharmaceutical waste, which are pharmaceuticals themselves or items contaminated by pharmaceuticals, chemical waste, reagents, disinfectants, solvents, but also batteries, thermometers, radioactive waste from radiotherapy or from laboratories. As segregation is important, it is also important to distinguish these various fractions. We can help doing this by color coding. What you see here are different color codes for different waste types. The black color code for non-infectious waste, then the yellow and red color code for infectious waste or sharp waste. Sharps are one fraction which needs special attention. They are at high risk mostly for healthcare workers, waste workers, or sometimes even users using recycled injection equipment. Here are some examples of how to segregate and store sharps in containers. These must be closable, puncture resistant, and leak proof on the sides and bottom. They shouldn't be overfilled. And, as we mentioned before, color coded and with the biohazard symbol. Even very low-cost solution can be developed, like this old plastic bottle, which is labeled with the biohazard symbol and adapted at the top so that the sharps can be entered into the bottle. Or this more sophisticated model, which can be directly put into the autoclave for disinfection. So what must we think about when developing a waste management plan for a healthcare facility? First of all, it must be embedded in a national strategy and policy. We should also have a clear assignment of responsibilities, and we have to know how much waste is actually generated and how much of that is hazardous. Then we have to think about financial arrangements and duties and develop a hospital waste management plan. Ideally, that is done together with the staff in the hospital. Before implementing, we need to conduct awareness campaigns so that everyone knows what there is to do in the hospital to ensure good segregation of the hazardous fraction. At municipal level, you can follow different waste management treatment strategies. That can be on-site treatment, where the healthcare facility treats its own waste, typically in large national or university hospitals. But you can also think of cluster treatment, where the hospital treats its waste plus waste from other facilities from smaller clinics or doctors' clinics. Or finally, a central treatment, where there is one dedicated treatment plant that collects and treats the waste from many healthcare facilities throughout the urban center or even region. I won't go into much detail about the different healthcare waste treatment options. However, I would like to refer you to this compendium of technologies for treatment destruction of healthcare waste from 2012. Summarizing, there are different systems that can be used. Autoclaves, steam or microwave systems, those used wet heat. Then we have dry heat systems. Those are usually adapted for smaller amounts. Then there is incineration, but there we need to pay attention that we might create dioxins. Finally, chemical disinfection or landfilling with special pits. So now let's look at a few examples of these different technologies. Here are two autoclaves in a hospital in Senegal. Or here, a rather low-cost autoclave, which is gas-powered in Tanzania. And here is a picture of a large autoclave in Vietnam. For incineration, I would like to show you only one example, the De Montfort Medical Waste Incinerator. It was designed to be as low cost as possible and easy to build. Investment costs are between $500 and $1,500. This module can process 12 kilos to 50 kilos per hour. What is particularly interesting is that it has a primary and a secondary combustion chamber, which allows temperatures to reach higher than 800 degrees up to 1,000. Typically, we have an ash pit nearby, but because we cannot guarantee emissions through the chimney, we should make sure that we place the incinerator in a downwind location. And finally, some examples of landfilling of healthcare waste. What you see here is a sharps pit, so a constructed cement pit where sharps can be disposed of through this tube. And what you see here is a placenta pit, so a constructed cement pit where human tissue, the placenta after birth, is deposited. Okay, now let me sum up what we've covered in this module. We've talked about hazardous household waste, its waste types, and some strategies for segregation and separate collection. Then we talked about healthcare waste management. We looked at classification, remember the sharps, as a high-risk fraction. We looked at segregation and separate collection, the color coding. We looked at strategies depending on the settlement pattern and how much waste is available. And then we ended with some treatment options, autoclaving, some incineration. If you're interested in reading more about healthcare waste management, I can recommend these 3 documents. They're all available on the WHO webpage and can be downloaded for free. Thank you for listening.